So with that, I welcome all the panelists in a second, but we start our conversation here on stage with an opening input by the State Secretary and the Special Envoy for International Climate Action from the German Federal Foreign Office. And prior to her current role, she was the Executive Director of Greenpeace International. So please welcome her with a round of applause, Jennifer Morgan.
Good evening, everyone, colleagues, excellencies, friends. It's excellent to be here with you, and clearly we are here in Munich, and we are seeing what a time of geopolitical transformation we are experiencing right now, which is also intersecting with the climate crisis. And I think we need to be thinking those things together, because the shift in the global energy landscape, well, it's reshaping international power structures too. And I'm looking forward to our panelist discussion, because I think this is a key element. First, it really obviously offers the chance to mitigate climate change as a fundamental threat of our time. Second, declining demand for oil and gas, well, it's going to put fossil fuel exporting countries under pressure with an increasing risk of instability. And I think, in addition, the competition over technological leadership and critical raw materials, obviously that is intensifying and playing itself out in many different ways. New supply chains, new dependencies and alliances also, though, mean new opportunities and challenges for our energy supply and global stability. So the regional concentration of material sourcing or component production, it's led to rising concerns about the vulnerability of supply chains to changing geopolitical constellations, including increasing protectionism or regional conflicts. And I think a key piece is that the access to essential technologies can actually decrease reliance on finite resources and alter global power dynamics. However, strategies like decoupling or friendshoring pose risks of global fragmentation, higher technology costs, and a slower energy transition, especially in developing countries. So in that brave net zero world that we're working towards, Germany, as most countries within the European Union, well, we will remain obviously an energy importer. Germany's strategic interest is in a sustainable, a secure, stable, and diversity supply of optimally, yes, green hydrogen, which is necessary to decarbonize our industry and keep our economy competitive. I think we're all looking forward to the upcoming European Clean Industrial Deal, which I think will also really address the connection between competitiveness and decarbonization, and also should assist in accelerating the changes needed to move green hydrogen more quickly, also with our partners. And I think that gives the opportunity for a new paradigm continued. I'll say a few words about partnerships in a minute with partner countries. Growing the European and clean tech sector, obviously it's in our economic and strategic interest as well. We want to participate in the value generated in these technologies and in the markets of the future. Market forces are driving green tech and energy transition today. We all know the IEA numbers. 85% of new power plants are renewable. They're projecting, obviously, a peak oil in the next few years. And I think that's not likely to change. I think the piece, though, is, yes, renewables are growing fast, but they're not growing fast enough. They're not being deployed at the scale and in the places, particularly where energy access is key, that we need. We need to be driving down the cost of capital and moving forward. And there, it's absolutely essential that international cooperation and the partnerships are going to be very key, and I would see absolutely critical in navigating through this new energy landscape and implementing the global energy transition. These partnerships, Germany has over 40 energy and climate partnerships. Well, they have to really reach tangible domestic benefits to legitimize the efforts, and that is are in Germany, but also countries who we are working with. And I think we have been working hard to form new kinds of partnerships, new paradigms of partnerships, one where we're speaking of social, ecological transformation, where there is local value created in the countries which have these resources. I think one of the very interesting things is that fossil resources, they are also quite abundant in various places, but renewable resources are much more broadly established. And I think finding, building on what we've started on these partnerships with countries like Colombia, with countries like the incoming COP presidency, Brazil, is very important. So I think that's, against all of this backdrop, the Foreign Office, we've developed the concept of decarbonization diplomacy with 3 central aims: leveraging decarbonization and sustainable development by means of green hydrogen, supporting the international hydrogen market ramp-up, and accompanying this process from a geopolitical perspective, like in today's side event. And I think it's important to have a good, solid conversation about hydrogen. We still have a ways to go, but I think we are in a tremendous moment in history, if you think about what we are trying to do. And I think this, the H2 Diplo initiative that is implemented by GIZ, it really shows how international cooperation can reconcile climate ambitions, mutual energy security interests, and a just transition in partner countries. So that contributes to our climate foreign policy, which we lead out of the Foreign Office. I'm very appreciative that we can have this discussion here today on the future of partnerships here at the MSC and at the BMW Pavilion. Herbert Quandt, thank you very much for that. And I really want to commend our co-hosts from IRENA and RIFS Potsdam for facilitating this event with us, and thank the team at H2 Diplo for organizing it. I'm sure we're going to have a great panel discussion. Over to you, Katie.
Jennifer Morgan, thank you so much, and she will be, of course, part of our panel in a moment. For further content setting, I welcome now the Director, Innovation and Technology Center at the International Renewable Agency. Please give him also a round of applause, Mr. Roland ROESCH.
Thank you so much for the nice introduction. It's a pleasure here to speak here on behalf of the International Renewable Energy Agency, an intergovernmental organization with 172 member countries. It's a pleasure to be partner here of the BMW Foundation, but also of Hydrogen Diplo. I would like to speak about the importance of green hydrogen for the global energy transition. We in IRENA, let's say, to make the energy transition happening, to get to net zero, it is very important to diversify the supply chains, to diversify the clean tech production, and also to create markets and an environment and collaborative platforms for free trade of clean technologies, of solar panels, of wind energy generators, but also for the trade of green hydrogen and also its derivatives. So methanol, ammonia, but also steel pellets. And you see already here, there is a lot ongoing, let's say, to trade, and what we need for the decarbonization of the energy economies. We need about 115 million tons of green hydrogen by 2050 that should be traded. And with our partners from the World Trade Organization, we have looked into how the green hydrogen trade could look like. And on this slide, you see there is different hubs looking at the availability of fresh water, of space, of availability of renewable resources, access to infrastructure. There is a busy schedule of countries that will import and countries that will export green hydrogen. We see currently that 60 countries have objectives of exporting or importing green hydrogen, and it is important to make those markets happen, to decarbonize specifically the end-use sectors where you have no other choice as using green hydrogen in the steel sector, in aviation, in shipping, but also in the chemical sector. And we believe in IRENA that of this 150 million tons of green hydrogen, which is, by the way, needing an energy amount, an electricity amount of the entire global production from all sources, which is a 20,000 terawatt hour that we have now. So it will require a lot of electricity, and we believe traded of this 150 million tons will be about 25%. 55% will basically, of this 25% of this 150 million tons will go through, 55% will go through pipelines, and 45% will be traded via ships, mostly as ammonia, and that requires an infrastructure where you need ports, harbors, bunkering, and also the infrastructures to connect the harbors with the backlands. And there I would like to come to three aspects that are important for the green commodity trade. In the first place, you need to build up the infrastructure, the pipeline, the repurposing of the pipelines. You need to build up the ports and the harbors, but also it is important to build up socially the skills. You need special workforces, and the good message is here in terms of socio-economic. The green hydrogen trade will create jobs on a level of 7-digit numbers of new job, very specialized job that we have to foresee. And also important is to make those markets happen. We need the certification, the origination, so the certification of the origins. Where is this green hydrogen coming from? And then you can trade and we can create those markets. This is the key thing. What does this mean for the political discussion? We clearly have to see that hydrogen is part of a bigger picture and needs a comprehensive planning to connect the hydrogen trade with the needs in the end-use sector, with building up the infrastructure and the skills. It is also important, and this is what we see happening now, there is a lot of diplomacy going on in the world in connecting, importing and exporting country. A strong emphasis is on the critical materials that are needed for the green hydrogen trade, and also, let's say, reducing the unnecessary consumption and do the green hydrogen trade in a very energy efficient way. And this will create a setup that will also create a shift in geopolitical structures that needs a certain discussion and needs to be foreseen in the discussion. I would like to end my presentation here. Thank you for the attention, and thank you very much for having the opportunity to speak here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and of course for pinpointing already to some of the questions. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a Q&A session at the end of our panel as well. So if there are already questions burning on your chest, please keep them ready. We have the microphone for you as well, just as a note at the beginning. Now we are coming to our panel when it comes to, of course, hydrogen trade, the green energy transition. How can nations balance and dance this balance of economic cooperation, competition and energy security? And for that, I welcome my panel here on stage. Jennifer Morgan, Rainer Kietzow, Katharina Reiche and Yadir Salazar-Mecha. Join me on stage and then we sit down and have a quick introduction. Please. Again, thanks for making time in busy calendars during MSC. It's a big pleasure, of course, to have this distinguished panel. Just want to do a quick introduction. Leila BENALI was also introduced on that panel, Minister of Energy Transition in Morocco. Maybe she's joining us a little bit later, but right now there are some other appointments coming along the way in the calendar. But we send her, of course, her greetings. Jennifer Morgan, State Secretary of the Federal Foreign Office. Rainer Kitze is also with us, Professor for Sustainability and Innovation at the Technische Universität in Berlin. Your research focuses on the governance of sustainability transitions, particularly when it comes to the energy sector. So thank you for being here. Katharina Reiche is with us, CEO of West Energie, and currently the head of 10,000 employees at the energy service provider West Energie, which is the largest subsidiary of the energy company E.ON. But you're also the chairwoman of the National Hydrogen Council in Germany, and prior to her current position, she served as a member of the German Bundestag with various governmental positions, including being Parliamentary State Secretary at the Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety. Thank you for being here. And last but not least, Her Excellency Yadier Salazar Meixa, Ambassador of the Republic of Colombia to Germany since October 2022, very actively engaged with a lot of discussion when it comes to energy transition. You have a distinguished career in Colombia's public sector. You held key roles in the Vice President's Office, the Diplomatic Service, the Ministry of Industry, Trade, Tourism, and now you're the Ambassador of Colombia in Germany. Muchas gracias for being here. Wonderful. Yes, we heard already a few questions coming into the air. I'd like to start with Katharina Reiche, with your perception coming from the private sector, because we had already a content setting from the scientific perspective, but also, of course, from the policy side, from your perspective coming from the private sector when it comes to energy transition in Germany, but also a little bit broader in Europe. What is your perception, especially also when it comes to hydrogen, because it is the talk of the town when we have a lot of energy debates, right?
Awesome. Thank you very much, and thank you to the BMW Foundation for setting up this discussion tonight. When I listen to Roland Resch, and we know quite a while, 5 years ago I could have held the speech also with very optimistic approach, but I think I have to pour a little bit water into the wine. Internationally, we see a lot. Last year, we saw $75 billion put in new hydrogen projects under FID and finalized under FID. That's 90% more than 23, so that's good. $92 billion are in projects which had really not only a final FID but under construction, which is also an increase. Now the bad message, or the less optimistic message, is coming where we see the most progress in China. In China are the largest progress, 1.1 gigawatt in operation, and the United States are the largest operator of blue hydrogen. When it comes to Europe, we see the goal of 22 million tons are out of reach by 2030. In Germany, we're at the goal of 10 gigawatt electrolyzer capacity. We are now, right now, at 0.3. And all day we got, during the weeks, last weeks, upcoming, we see less projects coming in, and a lot of projects are cancelled or on hold. And I think that are bad news. And Europe and also Germany could do a little bit more for having progress. What we lack are long-term offtake agreements. A lot of countries which started to invest. It's Colombia. It's the so-called the South, the Global South. They're waiting for offtake agreements which Europe or Germany don't offer. Why we don't offer? Because the industries which would need hydrogen most are under economic pressure, like steel, like chemistry. And due to the fact that the electricity costs went up very high, that project cost went up, that we have still broken supply chains, it's not only the delay in time, it's all the increased project costs which then have to cover by public money. And so the business cases are really running out of money, and you have to put so much public money to fund the gap that it would be hard for any household and for any public budget to finance every business case.
Thank you. We'll stop here, but I will dive into the to-dos later on because we're so thrilled to have you on the panel. Thank you for that first round. Jennifer Morgan, coming to you, of course, reacting a little bit to what was just mentioned. And I mentioned that you are Germany's Special Envoy for International Climate Action, which was a newly created role within both the German Federal Foreign Office, but also within the German government. And looking into the trend and the times we are living in, I always call it the crazy times with a lot of geopolitical turbulences and storms, but also with a decline in ambition when it comes to climate protection within these geopolitical rivalries and when it comes to cost-intensive transformation processes. Again, from your perspective, why is it crucial for Germany to maintain these goals when it comes to climate and energy goals? What keeps you still up on that motivational chart?
Well, and there are many countries that are continuing to move forward. I mean, the United Kingdom put forward a very ambitious national climate plan. Brazil put something forward which has strong ambition in it. The United Arab Emirates is diversifying. They've put something forward. We are not where we need to be. This is clear. We're on a track to 2.6 degree rise in temperature Celsius. We need to get, the gap to 1.5 is large. But I think the case for climate action, and I would say economic rationalism, is stronger than ever. So why do we keep doing this? Why? First of all, I think being here at the Munich Security Conference, it is a security concern. Climate change is a security challenge. We released a report just 2 days ago, or actually a consortium of scientists, a national interdisciplinary climate risk assessment by our intelligence community, our defense think tank, and our intelligence agency finds that climate is one of 5 top security challenges for Germany. So if you are looking not just in the horizon, but today, the many different levels of the costs of inaction on climate are extremely high, whether it be the impacts that are happening themselves and what that means to agricultural areas, to if you just look at the costs that Munich Re puts out there on the events, but also in terms of the security risks that are there. So that is, sitting here as the Federal Foreign Office, obviously the security challenge is essential. The second, and then I'll just, if I may comment briefly on Katharina Reich's important comments, I think is around the economics. So, it's quite clear if you look at the costs of inaction and the costs of the impacts, if you look at the drive that is happening to clean energy around the world, that renewable energy is the cheapest form moving forward. We see 85%, as I said, of new power plants being renewables, but it's not happening at the pace and scale that's needed. The financing isn't always there, right? And there are hurdles that are present. And so that's why I think as a country like Germany, which is a high-tech engineering country, I think we continue to see great opportunities for German industry, not only in Germany, but also abroad. But also we're very much looking towards what President von der Leyen has been putting forward. Because I think we are now in a moment, there's lots of uncertainties, but we have a new European Commission. We have a competitiveness compass that has been issued, preparing the groundwork for a clean industrial deal. It's clear that it needs to move faster. It's clear that there needs to be less bureaucracy on it. It's clear that although the prices have come back down since they went sky high after the Russian war of aggression, and I think it's quite extraordinary what our citizens in Germany pulled off during that time period, there's still a lot to do. My final thought is, this is a long-term game. It's short and long at the same time. So we need to have global emissions by 2030. That's in our security interest and our national interest to avoid those costs. But we're also trying to build a new infrastructure. We're working to build a whole new way. I visited steel companies, and it's just extraordinary. And so I think we need to go and learn from the barriers that are happening, but then respond quickly. And I don't get depressed by it. I think it's a learning moment that now with a new commission coming in, we have elections here soon, we need to get that stability and move forward. Listen to industry, listen to scientists to figure out, okay, in this mega transformation that we are trying to do in a very short time period, because of the climate crisis and the competitiveness concerns, how do we do that better?
Okay, thank you for that first start. I'd like to come to a key point that you also mentioned when it comes to working together. You both mentioned partnerships, and that's where I would love to start with you, Her Excellency. South, North-South partnerships, especially when we look into different hotspots, and EU, China, US, they all compete in bolstering economic ties, in developing reliable energy and critical supply chains with partner countries worldwide. And that's why I'm coming and looking to you, to the Latin American perspective. So maybe you can give us an outlook of how does Colombia navigate, in fact, through these competing interests of global powers when they all ring Colombia for partnerships? How is Colombia responding to these phone calls and to these calls for working together?
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, I want to recall some words that Jennifer was saying at the beginning. We need to balance, of course, our decarbonization goals with the reality that Colombia is highly dependent on fossil fuels. And as you mentioned in your intervention, this is a critical topic, and today much more than before, because it's a reality, and we are looking into the decarbonization goals they go together with the big assets that Colombia owns in biodiversity and water. But also we need to see that this economy that is heavily rely on hydrocarbons has big challenges in attracting now, as Katharina Reicher was mentioning, energy investments, because we need to ensure capital flows to maintain economic stability, social transformation, because Colombia needs that. This belongs to our sustainable peace. And then to make sure that extractive industry is as well connected to this, not only in a sustainable way, but in a social sustainable paradigm for the peace of Colombia. So we see a lot of, with concern, a growing geopolitical competition for the critical minerals that are needed for the just energy and economic transitions. And that's why we need these partnerships, because this goes into many areas, meaning technological transfer. So that's something that we are looking into. First of all, investments. But investments, then they are getting much slower, as particularly in the hydrogen economy, as you said. There's no offtake contracts there. That hasn't stopped us, but we are really concerned. Then we look into Germany, and that's why we have this very strong energy and environmental partnership with Germany, because we need knowledge. We need transfer of knowledge in all these green technologies that we don't have and that we need for the transition. And I think it was IRENA mentioning as well infrastructure. There's huge investments that we need to do as well to make sure we are now an exporter of fossil fuels. So we're one of the main exporters of coal. We need to change that. We have oil as well, but then we know how to export fossil fuels. But then we need an appropriate infrastructure to learn how to do it with clean energies, with hydrogen, and we need to train the people. We see that as an opportunity as well. That's why we haven't waited until the offtakes agreements come. So Ecopetrol, the Colombian national oil and gas company, has decided to invest in an own project at the refinery of Cartagena, where we have gray hydrogen, And it started already. It's the largest electrolysis capacity in Latin America. 800 tons green hydrogen a year. I think 22 megawatt. You can correct me. But it's allowing Colombia to capture then to reduce emissions of 7,000 or 8,000 tons of CO2. And we will, of course, wait for the offtake agreements. But for the moment, this is economically and environmentally and socially very accurate and appropriate for the strategy of Colombia and of Ecopetrol, and that's why we are moving forward this very big project, and we invite, of course, all German investors to look into that and to continue partnering with us in the energy, renewables, and hydrogen economy.
Thank you for outlining the vision, of course, of Colombia's transition, what it means to have a just energy transition, and diving into the word of just will be coming up in the next round, promise, because that is something that we should all dive in. Rainer, I saw a big smile on your face when Her Excellency mentioned the big numbers.
We were just discussing the conversion between megawatts and tons, and we weren't 100% sure.
Oh, okay.
That sounds reasonable.
All right, when we talk about energy transition, of course, we also have to talk about the energy-intensive industries and the transformation in that regard. Maybe you can give us, from your scientific perspective, an overview on the key trends and also the geopolitical implications that this transformation means. Do we have any winners and losers that you can name?
Yeah, I mean, with that, maybe I'll emphasize that why we need hydrogen and renewable or low-carbon hydrogen is mainly to decarbonize energy-intensive industries. There's obviously a lot of other applications as well that could use hydrogen in certain situations and cases, but energy-intensive industry is really one major field also where Germany and the European Union needs clean hydrogen. And so obviously, due to the energy intensity, that also means that those places, those countries, those geographies that have access to low-cost, abundant, renewable energy, and then also hydrogen, have an advantage in this new space. That means specifically that the US is actually in great shape, because the US has great renewable energy potential and can really move forward in decarbonizing its existing energy-intensive industry. It has a big industry already, and it can decarbonize that. China is not in such bad shape either.
How's the shape of Europe?
I'm coming to Europe. So Europe, of course, is vulnerable in the sense that it will remain dependent on some energy imports. Jennifer Morgan already said that. And that means it has to build partnerships. And that's obviously a response to that we need to secure those energy resources from elsewhere. But it's also something that Europe can build on geopolitically and economically to build broader alliances and broader partnerships for a net zero future. So I think, yes, it's a challenge, of course, for Europe, but it's also an opportunity to capture, and not just for the European Union and for Germany, but also for those other partners, which is what Yadir was speaking about. And I mean, we did a survey of about 300 experts in the chemical and steel sector all over the world, pretty spread out pretty evenly, and they all predicted pretty clearly that around by 2050 or a little bit beyond, the access to low-cost renewable energy will be an absolutely key factor in attracting investment for those energy-intensive industries. Also, policy is going to play a big role, industrial policy and also alliance building, as I spoke about, but renewables will be a major aspect.
What would you like to answer to Katharina Reich's comment on where does the money come from and the capital for these changes of transformation? Because the public funds, they are scarce, right? So who's paying for these transformational processes in the best case?
I mean, there's a number of issues with the existing policy framework around hydrogen, but I think one of the problems with the policy framework is that it still does rely primarily, actually, on public funds to move things forward. And what we need is a policy framework that really stimulates the last mile of demand. So meaning not necessarily the off-takers of hydrogen, but those products that are going to actually end up in the hands of the end consumer. So let's take cars that use steel, green steel, that is produced with green hydrogen. Or I had an example now that Heineken is investing in a, let's say, value chain approach where they're working with farmers who are going to use net zero fertilizers produced with green hydrogen. And since Heineken is part of this endeavor, it's really a very low cost for Heineken. It's maybe 1 or 2 cents per beer that they sell. And that's the way that way you can mobilize private finance. So what I'm really trying to say is we need policies that bring in the final end consumer to actually pay that premium. And that can't be any product, because we don't always have the end consumer able to pay that premium. But we need to find those products, like, for example, premium cars. We have the example of Heineken, and find ways to mobilize that investment. And that's actually similar to how we did it in renewable electricity, where we had the feed-in tariff who did precisely that.
Katharina Reich, I'm looking to you. Where do you see a big question mark in this argument from your perspective?
We don't lack ambitions. Every country and also companies have their ambitions. And it is absolutely clear that we have to combat climate change. What we don't have is the bankability of these projects.
Yeah.
And why we don't have it? First, you're completely right. You can't finance a transition to net zero for a whole economy, for economies, by public funding. So it has to be 90% on private, maybe 10% on funding. What we need is a pragmatic approach and long-term security. The investments we speak right now, investments in pipelines, in power plants, in green steel mill, that's nothing you can write off after 5 or 10 years. It stands for the next 20, 30 years, especially infrastructure. So what we need is a long-term framework which is secure. I don't say that you can't adjust over the time. You have to do this. But imagine we would have put all the levies on renewable energy in Germany we have right now from the very beginning. We wouldn't have to install one PV cell on one rooftop. So, and of course, it took nearly 20 years, and by the way, 200 billion euros, to achieve 60% of renewable energy in our electricity consumption. So it took time. We made mistakes. Policy made mistakes. Industry made mistakes. But we had, you mentioned it, a 20-year framework, the feed-in tariff. We lack systems like this. The bankability comes when you have a pull effect, and of course, the whole world is looking at Europe and actually on Germany. We are still the powerhouse, and if we don't create demand, nobody else will. So, but to secure and to have a bankability of a project, you have to have long-term security. Or you have to put in intermediators who take the risk. One steel mill can't take the whole risk of one project. So how to intermediate? What could we do? First, we could put in quotas. You mentioned it, quota for steel, for some goods. We could have a green gas quota. We could blend our gas grids with hydrogen. I think we have to put every single measurement on the table to discuss and not to exclude. Second, I spoke about more pragmatism. Green hydrogen, and I think it became clear after 5 years, it's very, very expensive. And our industry couldn't buy hydrogen 10 to 12 euros per kilogram. That would destroy every business case. Why don't we do it like the Americans do? I know the IRA isn't that shiny as it's supposed to be. Chapter 45 took a while until it was published. But what they do is they put a low incentive on low decarbonization, and they put a higher incentive on green decarbonization. And what I would pledge for is to have also this pragmatic approach and give blue and other colors a chance to come in to build up an economy, to build up a hydrogen economy from the scratch. You don't do this in 5 years. But if we put all requirements on a developing product, it would kill it. So be pragmatic in the beginning and then narrow the regulation when we have or when we are close to liquidity on markets.
Thank you, Katharina Reiche. Jennifer Morgan, when we talk about partnerships and when you were just listening to the to-dos, so to say, what makes a partnership from your perspective pragmatic but also just?
Well, I think the first thing is a partnership has to come from also the partner country. So if we look at existing partnerships right now, I think one of the flagships that's working is the Just Energy Transition Partnership from South Africa. That came from South Africa. It was their idea. It was their, they developed it. And then there was then a response that came from a number of contributor countries together. So that it has to be just in process, not only in substance. Procedural justice is very important, I think. Then I think it also, in a dialogue with countries, obviously each has its own interests. I mean, we have the policy that if you're looking at green hydrogen or hydrogen to import, that the first goal needs to be energy access in the country. Right? So if Colombia needs the green hydrogen for your energy access, then we're looking at Namibia right now. That is that's the priority. Then and also looking at what are the new models for value creation. Kenya is also a big player in this space, wants to be attracting steel and be producing green steel. So looking at different initiatives that can come from building out its renewables as well as being able to be part of the value chain, which is also a challenge. But I think looking at what is the self-interest of each of the partners together and not just having an extractivist model as we have had in the past on fossil fuels. And I think if you are looking, everybody today and other days is looking to the transatlantic, but I actually think we need to be looking east and south because that's where the neighborhood, that's where the networks are. That's where a lot of the supply is. That's where the opportunities are. And I think finding those ways that we can be creating new partnerships in a world where BRICS and others, if I think back to the climate negotiations, there is a whole group of countries with whom Germany has partnerships that are not part of this big battle that's geopolitical, but are very interested in their own development, obviously, and are seeing the benefits that come from building out, I would say, renewables, green hydrogen being part of that potential process.
These new areas of partnerships, I mean, I wrote it down, the Federal Foreign Office has hydrogen diplomacy offices in Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, Oman, Kenya, Kazakhstan, Colombia, Angola. So going south, going east, is that the reason why you spread out into these regions? Because you want to fill the gaps in these areas?
I think we spread out because we have a large demand. And also because we see the benefits of working with, we've learned to diversify, and that's very important as well. And I think also you see in a climate foreign policy, the combination of economic development with climate coming together, and that's priority for those partner countries as well as the opportunity to be able to be building new alliances, which are important not only for climate action, but also for a values-based, interest-based foreign policy.
Her Excellency, coming back again to the word just in the word and title of Just Partnerships when it comes to partnerships and hydrogen, how is Colombia, again, zooming in, managing it to foster trade, to also strengthen their own competitiveness without being dependent, and also to strengthen local development? Is this part of this just? Maybe you can zoom in with us what it really means on a local level in Colombia.
Yeah, it's part of everything you have mentioned here. It's very complicated, and you need to make sure that Before, for example, we know we are working with Germany because Germany has a big demand of energy, and we can supply that demand. Colombia now, for example, 10% of the energy you consume in Colombia is solar energy. When we don't have the Niño and Niña phenomenon, then we are running in an energy matrix that is pretty clean, 70% and all this. So we can, but then we need to look into our own necessities, as you have mentioned, and then those communities, let's say La Guajira, that's one of the places in the world, and that can be confirmed by IRENA, where you have the best wind and solar capacities and the steady, it's a perfect place to have renewable energies. But if you look into La Guajira, these people do not have access to water. And if you look at that region as well, there we used to, or we are export then let's say coal. And what is the benefit for those regions? They suffer of hunger, so no benefit. So we are not going to replicate the fossil fuel model for hydrogen or renewables energy exporting model that is not bringing anything to the communities. But within the communities as well, we see a big opportunity for investments as well. There you need to have economies with the communities that they can take care as well of their own energy necessities, create their reindustrialization policy, and connect there and make a market, because it's the same with the hydrogen economy. We need to make a market. What we see is that you were mentioning that, Katarina. We need long-term, and Colombia is working on that. That's just as well, not internally, but internationally, a long-term energy sovereignty. For our country. So meaning that we need to connect the cooperation, the transfer of technology, the partnerships, the offtake contracts, etc., with national sustainability, with national biodiversity, and with industrial policies. That's extremely important for us. There is nothing that is going to happen as well in the Global South if we don't speak with the Global North about industrial policies. And this is in the energy sector very important. So we see our own just energy transition inside, and we have energy communities, our own policies, but this is also connected to the international just energy transition, where technology is available, where we can create green jobs together, etc. Mm-hmm.
Before I open up the floor to your questions, I'd like to come in from a different angle again. Rainer, we talk, of course, about energy transition, different partnerships, but we haven't yet spoken about security concerns when it comes to infrastructure. Infrastructure that is needed was mentioned by Mr. ROESCH, but the critical infrastructure at risk is, of course, also a topic when we need to debate about the energy transition. So how would you say, do we need to monitor these trends when it comes to security concerns for large-scale infrastructure projects? How do we need to monitor such trends, and how do you how will it be influenced then by the debate of scaling up big-scale projects? You know, what are the to-dos of thinking of when it comes to critical infrastructure as well?
Hydrogen infrastructure, energy infrastructure?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that one of the challenges in critical infrastructure is for hydrogen, let's say in the North Sea, for example, with offshore wind, etc., is that right now Germany or the European Union is it's gonna be challenging for us to build out that infrastructure all by ourselves, because with the pace and the scale that we need to do that, it's going to be difficult to do that all by ourselves. So that kind of raises a similar question that we've had in the digital sector, where Huawei is one of the most important suppliers, but it's a big question whether we want to introduce that those components into that infrastructure. And I think the same question arises for Europe around that energy infrastructure. And it's basically a trade-off, I think. It's going to be a trade-off between speed and sort of turning over that infrastructure partly to partners that maybe could pose a security risk if they have access to the data, access to those platforms, the converter platforms in the North Sea. Also for traditional security issues, but it's a discussion that's actually not really happening yet.
Why is it not happening? Because we see the attacks in the Baltic Sea, for example. So it's not a risk that is coming out of the air, I would say. It is a risk. So why are we not talking about it?
I'm not sure. I actually wrote up a proposal for that question, and I'm trying to get it funded. So we'll see if we can stimulate that discussion a little bit. Because I think one of the challenges is that we don't really know much about it yet. I mean, this is something you can tease out. I mean, there's people in the defense ministry that are aware of these problems. They're talking to some of the stakeholders in the sector. But it's, I don't think there's that much information and data out there. So that's one of the reasons we want to work on that. And then I think that's a broader challenge that Germany and Europe has, is that often these decisions on these questions, let's take the example of the port in Hamburg, where a Chinese investor wanted to take over a significant part of that. Nobody had a plan for how to respond to that. So it becomes a very messy, ad hoc process of deciding, okay, this is how we're going to handle this. What we need is much more dialogue and much more systematic thinking about this, so that when we have these questions arising, we know what our response is going to be, or at least we know what the process is going to be to arrive at a decision.
Do I see you nodding?
So I mean, you might mistrust industries, but we are not completely dumb. First of all, you're right. I think some of our enemies did a lot on detecting submarine infrastructure, and we haven't been aware that we don't only face cyber attacks, but also physical attacks. And of course, we're facing it in Germany, and we act, really. We invest in sensoric and actoric. We invest in drones. We invest in sensibilization of our workforce. We work together with state and state organizations, from police over the Bundeswehr and others. We do trainings together and simulating crisis. So I wouldn't say that we are completely unprepared, but it's right. You can't give 100% security, but you can all the time enhance and improve. So we have the so-called KRITIS framework, where critical infrastructure supplier, as we are also telecommunication, have to invest. Maybe we are not fast enough, but that we don't do nothing, I would really oppose.
The government is also quite...
There is going to be a heated discussion now. Jennifer, would you like to comment quickly on that before I get ready for one? Do we have a question from the audience? Yes. Yes, I see one.
Okay, then I just want to say there's also quite a lot of discussion, and maybe there's not enough data on the issue, and I think it's always good to have more data. But the risks are we're very well aware of the risks, and I think the question of how one mitigates those risks is maybe not as visible in the discussion in public that it should be, but it's definitely front and center inside my ministry. I can just say that.
I put pressure on you now. I want to have at least one question from the audience. So one person is raising a hand, right? Having a question to this very sensitive topic of hydrogen diplomacy. I mean, you are all experts in the field. Okay. This is maybe we're all tired from the Munich Security Conference.
Katie,
oh, wonderful. Omar, please give him a round of applause. He's coming from Mosul Eye, doing tremendously important work in Iraq. Omar, it's lovely to have you. Great to have you here. Welcome in Munich. Please, your question.
Thank you. If you could, it's not a question, it's quite kind of a request probably to elaborate more on the potential of expanding the market to Middle East, as you say, to go east, to go south, and what potential does this have also for the region, and how could they be can a case be made for them to also move in that direction?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have partnerships with Saudi Arabia, with United Arab Emirates. I mean, Minister Habeck was also in the region on these areas. And what I have seen actually is, I think those two countries I would know best is, and they're at different paces, but a real, especially in a country like Saudi Arabia with so much land and so much sun, that the diversification of their economy that is needed can be assisted and can be moved forward by developing green hydrogen. It's an area that we have quite a lot of work with them on, and also in the case of UAE. I think that, you know, the speed, the frameworks that you were speaking about, I mean, which are obviously essential, long, loud legal signals that are required are there. But I think that there is, you know, there is a recognition. Every one of those countries is playing out to be the last producer of oil. UAE has said that they will celebrate the last drop that they export. But I think it's a real business proposition, and I would say still nascent maybe in Saudi Arabia, but very well recognized. And if you look domestically at what they're doing, actually, you will have seen quite a lot of progress on renewable energy development in Saudi Arabia for their own domestic consumption, as well as looking at export. Lots to do still, but I think it's extremely, for us, it's a very important part of the world that we're working with.
Yaria, what would be your comment on that?
Yeah, maybe since I'm not, Colombia is not close to the Baltic Sea, etc., I'm going to bring, and we are at the Munich Security Conference, I want to bring maybe our view from Colombia, from many countries, from Latin America and the Global South. When we speak about energy security and all these topics, we are thinking a lot about the critical minerals traceability. And you know that Colombia has, because this is really serious, and this is for us a security question as well. That's why our country has put a proposal for a binding treaty, because governance in energy at global scale is extremely important, and we need to increase that, and we need to strengthen that. And this critical mineral traceability, we put it at the COP30. We need to work together to make sure that these essential minerals for the energy transition, like lithium, copper, cobalt, etc., which are a lot of those resources are in Latin America, that we mitigate irresponsible extraction practices and the risk associated to this, because it's connected as well to the just transition, to the communities, and to security for us. So I wanted to bring that perspective as well for this discussion.
Absolutely, looking ahead to the COP30 coming up in Belém in Brazil. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, we are all, as always, with the most exciting topics, right, running out of time, ladies and gentlemen, and it's a long day. Please give the panel a warm-hearted applause. Thank you to Jennifer Morgan, Her Excellency Yadia Salazar-Mecha, Rainer Kitzo, and Katharina Reiche. Thank you. Merci. Yes,
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you. Muchas gracias. Wonderful.